YouTube, remember me? My name's Gray, this is Consoletronix, and I've returned after an overly long absence to once again bring to you the very best in retro-themed entertainment. But an ordinary, everyday, run-of-the-mill video simply wouldn't be good enough to herald my return. I need to do something special, something monumental, and it's with something monumental in mind that I revisit a franchise that before Capcom's stablemate Street Fighter 2 came along and swept all before it, easily ranked amongst the most high profile and must-play titles of its day and beyond. So join me in my look back at the king of the side-scrolling beat-em-ups in my Final Fight series review. For many gamers in the summer of 1989, the release of Capcom's Final Fight largely slipped them by, but it didn't take long for the talk in the playground and wall-to-wall magazine coverage to whip the young beat-em-up freaks out there into parting with their pocket money for a go on what was fast becoming a seminal title in arcades up and down the country. Produced by Capcom very much with the American market in mind and trying to piggyback the beat-em-up trend begun with Double Dragon, only to become the industry standard as far as beat-em-ups are concerned. Set in Metro City, a metropolis with a problem. That problem is crime, in particular the Mad Gear Gang, who hatch a sinister scheme to keep meddling politicians and police from sticking their snouts into their business by kidnapping the city mayor's daughter. Unfortunately, their plan had more holes than Arsenal's defence, because when it comes to family matters, an ex-professional wrestler turned political heavyweight Mike Hagar, together with a couple of his gym mates Cody and Guy, heads downtown to introduce himself to the constituents with a left-right coalition of punches, kicks and pile drivers. But only one burning question remained. When, if ever, would we see a home port? And we wouldn't have to wait too long for an answer, because with the release in 1990 of the Super Famicom, Nintendo wasted no time in making sure one of the biggest hit arcade brawlers was also available exclusively for the system. And as a staunch Sega owner, I don't mind telling you that my resolve was indeed tested when reviews started coming in and phrases like arcade perfect were flying around. But despite the hype, some bizarro edits were enforced, such as the removal of scantily clad sexpots Poison and Roxy, and the two-player mode. But the strangest decision has to be the disappearance altogether of 1/3 of the main characters, Guy. But all these factors combined don't even come close to the biggest problem I've always had with this game. Something that's boiled my piss, resulting in my balls bubbling away like a pair of hairy cauldrons for years now. And that's the difficulty. Now don't get me wrong, I've always loved this port, but bloody hell, with titles like this and Super Ghouls and Ghosts, Capcom just seemed to have a knack for making games that result in me wanting to headbutt my television in frustration like a madman. Few companies in the long and storied history of video games have mastered the art of flogging dead horses quite like Capcom. From annual incremental upgrades to both Mega Man and Street Fighter, they even tried it with Final Fight, releasing Final Fight Guy. This time the man with the tightest trousers in the universe, Cody, sits out proceedings, and All-American Ninja Guy is available for selection. That's it. No extra stages or features, not even the 2-player mode, which maybe could have been used as justification for owning both copies. They do seem to have eliminated some of the slowdown that was in the original, but that's about it. A sad state of affairs that unfortunately we didn't nip in the bud at the time, as now it's the norm for the industry. But Capcom could redeem themselves, as Final Fight Guy got one thing right. It proved the brand still had legs. Could Hager & Co. make lightning strike twice in a true sequel? Despite a somewhat lukewarm reception upon release, the idea of a Final Fight sequel built from the ground up on Snes hardware rather than trying to crowbar an arcade game onto Nintendo 16-bit intrigued me. But who would accompany series star and, please God, future president Mike Hager? Well, rather than choosing between Cody or Guy this time around, Capcom controversially dropped the pair of them, replacing them with generic swordsman Carlos, who lacks either the charisma or design to really stand out as a main character for such a high-profile series. But tagging along for the ride is the first female protagonist of the franchise, and that's Guy's sister-in-law and ninja in training, Maki, who, like the palette-swapped sirens of the original Poison and Roxy, would also be subject to censorship outside of Japan. Now, I won't waste too much time on the story, because quite frankly, neither did Capcom. This time it's Guy's bird that's been kidnapped, and you have to travel the globe, kicking in heads as you go, in a worthy sequel that improves a lot on the original, but fails to raise the bar in what was, by 1993, an overcrowded market as far as beat-em-ups are concerned. And Chun-Li cameo aside, there's really not a lot here to recommend unless you're already a beat-em-up fan. "1993 was a busy year for the Final Fight franchise. Its sequel was released on Snes, but somewhat ironically was largely overshadowed by the near arcade-perfect port of the first game on Sega's Mega CD. But there would be another Final Fight game brought to us in the same year, and it would appear on the unlikeliest of systems, the NES. And no, this was no knockoff or farmed-out, cut-down cash-in. Capcom would instead produce, for me, one of the best games the humble Nintendo 8-bit had seen in a number of years, in Mighty Final Fight, a super deformed, tongue firmly in cheek reimagining of the first game, that somehow not only retains the feel of the arcade, but also has a quirky charm all of its own. Overlooked by many on its release, it's now sadly one of the harder to obtain holy grail titles for the system. But if any game deserved that status, then this one is it. A pint-sized classic that punches well above its weight. Wait, what? There was a Final Fight 3? Really? I don't remember this. I might be having a Mandela moment right now. I better check the shower quick for Bobby Ewing, because I think I'm dreaming this one into reality. But no, it seems it's just me, and a third installment of the franchise, like the second, got a SNES exclusive release in 1995, which may partly explain why it's received about as much attention as Hunter Biden's laptop, as by this time the 32-bit party was well and truly getting underway. And with its title in Japan being Final Fight Tough, making it sound like yet another re-release, I think we can all be forgiven for letting this one slip past us. But is it a gem worth tracking down, or a stain on the legacy of the series? Well, I love it. It's easily the best Snes effort, with Street Fighter style special moves and combos and a nice presentation. Guy returns along with new recruit Dean, and although Ninja Mink's Mickey's gone, to replace her we have Lucia, who sports a pair of hot pants shorter than a Donald Trump apology. And I'd like to show you her in action, but I think I'll just leave it like this, if that's alright with you. Overall, Final Fight 3 is a triumph, but the market was changing, and if the franchise wanted to stay relevant, it too would need to change.
Ready?
Come on! Ready? Fight!
The 32-bit era was an exciting time for gamers. Finally, developers could remove the shackles of developing for 16 bits and really let their creative juices flow, both in story and scale. Sadly, the road of nostalgia is paved with the bones of once great franchises that failed to make the leap. But if there was one studio who I'd bet the farm on in turning a side-scrolling beat-em-up classic into a one-on-one fighter, it would have been Capcom. Unfortunately, this game comes to us from Capcom's B team in America, who were quickly shut down after the game's low-key release in arcades. This is the Sega Saturn port, which was released, if you can believe this, in the year 2000 and only in Japan, making it the last ever Saturn title. And while a functional if forgettable 3D fighter, it at the very least puts to rest all the talk of Poison being a bloke cross-dressing, which all started with the weird censorship laws of Nintendo. The PS2 was and still is one of my favourite consoles. Few machines can boast of such a large and iconic lineup of games, but it would also come to be the graveyard for many classic franchises with pitiful attempted 3D reboots, for series such as Echo, Altered Beast and Alien Syndrome, to name but a few. And sadly, we can now also add Final Fight to the wall of shame, with the pathetic Final Fight Streetwise. Like the first game, Capcom tried to tap into what it thought Americans wanted, so naturally, it's a crude Fighting Force meets GTA abomination. Gone is any of the charm or heart that earlier titles had. This game is an utter embarrassment, and a sad end for a franchise that stood atop the gaming mountain in its day, but rather than play to its strengths or history, instead tried chasing trends. And while there's been talk for many years of a new game in development, perhaps the warm reception of once chief beat-em-up rival Streets of Rage's 4th installment could persuade Capcom to go back to the drawing board with this long dormant IP. So my name's Gray, you've been watching Consoletronix. Apologies for ending on a bit of a downer, but I'll have more videos up soon, so stay tuned. Thank you very much for watching, and until the next time, goodbye.